Paul Hunter is now covering the story live for us. Glad to see you on this story, Paul. It's a very different look there again at Columbia from what we saw earlier this week, certainly after that massive police response in the overnight hours a couple of nights ago. What have you seen since you've been on the ground in New York?
Very different than what we've seen play out in Los Angeles overnight. Certainly as it stands, of course, those kinds of scenes were literally right here a couple of nights ago. I'm just outside Hamilton Hall, the building that some of the demonstrators had sort of occupied. But as of right now, it's almost back to normal. There are police vehicles on the other side of the cameras that you can't see. You see the barricades there. Where the blue tent is where students are going in today. So they're maintaining a police presence for the next couple of weeks until the commencement ceremonies in middle of May to sort of make sure that the commencement ceremonies can happen. Classes are back on. And so, as I say, things are almost back to normal. Yesterday we were here at around lunchtime. There was a demonstration. We think actually what happened at Fordham, where the people who were here at lunchtime moved over there, not exactly sure. But they said they'll come back every day at around lunchtime to keep making the point that the demonstrators had been making. All of that said, Heather, the truth is it's a very complex circumstance, right? The students going back in today to attend classes underlines, I think, what a lot of people who weren't a part of the demonstrators were starting to talk about, which is, like, life has to go on here. And there are a lot of people who are saying, well, you know, I think tuition here is $90,000, $100,000 a year, depending on the program you're in. They have a responsibility to carry that out. And at some point, you have to say to people, we need to do that. And if the demonstrators are going to say, well, no, we're not going to leave, and then the university says, well, then we're going to bring the police in, and they still don't leave, and then the police do come in, this is the kind of thing that can happen. But who's right and who's wrong? It gets complicated fast. And, you know, you were noting in the intro that a lot of people here, I think we heard it from the mayor yesterday and I think from the district attorney, talk about these agitators, right? So in that demonstration here at lunchtime yesterday, there was a guy walking around with a kind of a red and black flag. And at some point I went up to him off camera and said, what's your deal? And he said, he's a Christian anarchist. Right? And like, so you've come here, ostensibly, I guess, to agitate for Christian anarchy. Well, that's a whole different thing. But that's where it gets further complicated. I mean, I think there is a lot of engagement and empathy for the message that the demonstrators were making, but like that's not everybody that's there. And when passions get ratcheted up by people with other agendas, it's another complication. All that to say, it's sort of back to normal here today, but the big question now for everybody who was here that night, a couple of nights ago, and for the previous number of weeks, and those who are at Fordham and other universities here and in other states and campuses across the country, is what are the next steps after the police have come and cleared out? And that remains a question mark.
Paul, of course, normally you're based in Washington, so this is perfect because I want to ask you a political question. We hear from the protesters, yes, divestment, that's a big demand, but also the push to obtain an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And that is something the Biden administration is trying to work toward. But many in that protest movement have been vocal about the slow pace of that, the lack of forcefulness as they perceive it, and Biden's really continued unequivocal support for Israel. So how may all of that play out in this high-stakes election year?
What a question. Look, you may have noticed that Joe Biden hasn't said a lot in the last few days on this issue. That's because it's very complicated for him as well. He has a lot of people in his so-called base are on both sides of this debate. He has a lot of people who are supporters, who are pro-Israel. So he has to be careful on the line that he walks here. And he has a lot of people on the demonstrator side of things, let's just call them young people, who are a big part of the Democrat voting base. You're right to say, it's a very close race right now with him and Donald Trump. And in a number of states where this is a particular issue, it is extremely close. So he has to be very careful, and they're watching very carefully what goes on. There are other factors in play here. You know, the university school year is ending soon. If there is a ceasefire, does this change that equation? So certainly this puts heat on him to continue pressing for that. We saw Blinken in the Middle East this week. The pressure to get a ceasefire is ratcheted up by these demonstrations. There's no doubt about it, and that's because this is an election year and because this election is very tight. But Joe Biden has to remember he's got to walk that line because a great number of his supporters are also pro-Israel. So it's very complicated, Heather, but the White House is watching extremely carefully how this plays out and is very careful in what it says for all of the above reasons. It's complex no matter how you look at it.